You are listening to the Lawyer Stories podcast with host Benny Gold. Lawyer Stories was founded in July 2017 on Instagram and is an expanding global network of lawyers and law students sharing their personal journeys to the noble profession of the practice of law. Join us on this podcast as we dig deeper into these stories and hear from lawyers and law students from around the world in all areas of the legal profession. Here at Lawyer Stories, we believe that every lawyer has a story. What's yours?
Welcome to the Lawyer Stories podcast with Benny Gold. Today we welcome in Don Smith, managing partner at Clinesmith LLP, litigation attorney, fighting elder abuse, out in Dallas, Texas, but now you have multiple offices and helping clients anywhere, really. Welcome in, Don.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah, and before we get into your story, which is pretty cool, actually, I went through it today. I do want to give a shout out and a mention to our friends at Lex Reception, where law firms can switch off knowing that they're going to be covered by Lex, from answering calls and messages in real time to appointment scheduling. Clients will receive the care and support they need with our friends at Lex Reception. Their answering service specialists are on hand 24/7, so you'll never miss a call or a future case. They have custom scripting and software that can seamlessly integrate with your current workflow. Lex is going to make sure every potential client gets fantastic service from the very first call. If you use our code, you can get $250 off your first month using Lex Reception. Simply use our link, and you can reach out to me if you can't see the link anywhere, and we're happy to help. So thank you to our friends at Lex Reception. We strongly recommend them. And Dawn, thank you so much again. Back to you.
I'm ready.
All right. So we haven't yet featured you on Lawyer Stories, which is we have a platform on Instagram, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, where we share the stories and why people became attorneys and sort of what they're doing now. We like to highlight them. But I have read your story. And so you grew up in Tucson, Arizona. And you wrote in your first sentence of your story, you were guided by a strong single mom and supportive grandparents. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. My mom and dad got divorced when I was really young, like about 2 years old.
Okay.
And my mom worked full time, and I was really fortunate that my grandparents were always there for me. My grandfather worked for a Chevrolet dealership his whole life, but my Nana, my mom's mom, she was home, so could always take care of me, pick me up from school and that kind of thing. So I was just kind of surrounded by a lot of people that loved me, just foundationally, even though I didn't have both parents at the very beginning.
And they encouraged you to keep going and like you can do whatever you want. And I'm sure like hearing that at a young age is so important.
Yeah. It's kind of strange. Like, I just grew up believing that there were no obstacles really. And I don't know what they did to instill that in me. I've just always felt like I can do whatever I want to do. Now I've definitely had some hurdles, right? And had to overcome some things, but
Sure.
it just seems like nothing's really too hard, right? If you focus on something and put all the pieces in place to move forward, you can get through a lot of stuff, and I've come through a lot of adversity to get where I am. And I know that it's because of just kind of, they gave that to me somehow. I have kids now, and I hope I've done the same for them, but I don't know how they did it really, but it's always been with me.
Do you think going through some sort of adversity helps people to become like a stronger professional or stronger in what they set out to do?
I mean, it has to, right? Going through those things and just getting out on the other side, right, it just gives you a taste that you can do something, right? That you can do something a little bit more challenging. So, I mean, I moved out of my house when I was 13 years old because my mom got into a car crash and ended up, really getting addicted to pain medication, opioids. And my other grandmother took me in, and I ended up getting to live with my dad, my
Mhm.
real dad again, and got to know him. But going through all of that when I was in high school, I went to 3 different high schools. I
Mhm.
mean, that certainly built some sort of, base, right?
Sure.
To be
Yeah.
able to get through hard things later, for sure.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Wow. You have you've done it all yourself, and you sort of, you went through some hard times, and it definitely helped you to get you momentum to where you are. So another thing I found interesting about your story, because my first interest personally came in constitutional law. I'm licensed in 3 states. I'm licensed in the Northeast in Maine, Massachusetts, and Connecticut. But I always loved constitutional law. Like, there was just something about it that I just loved reading the opinions and the language and the cases and the jurisprudence that would sort of develop, and the decisions. And you had an eighth grade trip to visit the U.S. Supreme Court, and it kind of ignited some sort of like flame in you. Like, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it was an 8th grade trip. I was really lucky to get to go. Had to really kind of work hard to be able to save enough money for my
Sure.
family to even let me go. And I don't know, it's just so regal in that chamber.
Yes.
It's
Yep.
really impressive. Eh, Seeing it on TV just doesn't really even it doesn't do it justice,
Right.
not at all. And I've always wanted to be a lawyer ever since I was like 9 years old. I think going through an experience, when I was younger with my mom, she got remarried and my stepdad adopted me. I think going through that process was probably what made me think that, but actually being in that chamber and seeing those lawyers argue and the questions coming from the justices, I was just like, wow, I mean, and at the Supreme Court, really one case, one lawyer makes all the difference in the world,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
looking back on it, I mean, the creativity associated with being a good lawyer makes all the difference,
Right.
and
Right.
when you're on that level, it's crazy.
Yeah. So were you interested in con law at all? Like, you sometimes
Yeah.
look at con law. Yeah. Okay. So that was a
So
big thing
yeah,
for
I'm a total law geek, right?
you.
Just I'm a nerd, right? I love reading cases. I
Yep.
love trying
Yep.
to figure out how they work, how you can
Yep.
use them in your case. Yeah, no, I love it.
That's awesome. And so you attended the University of North Texas and studied economics, and then on to the Whittier Law School in Southern California. Tell us about like earning an economics bachelor degree and the decision to go on to law school. Like, did you always, I know you did have that time in eighth grade, but was it something you had to think about? Like, were you thinking, oh, maybe I'll, go work, at a financial firm or something, or law school was it, and like economics was just like your undergrad?
So really, really funny. So I was a political science major to start out with, right? Because I knew I wanted to be a lawyer always. That's what I wanted to be. So I started out in political science, which those classes were easy for me.
Yeah.
And I found out first of all, full disclosure, failed out of college my first semester. Went out, worked. I worked in a restaurant, worked as a bartender, put myself through school, but I was out having fun for like the first 4 years of my 20s, right?
It happens.
So, so when I look back, my GPA was not great. So I knew I had to do really well on the LSAT. So I started doing
Okay.
some research, and economics majors somehow did better on the LSAT than
Wow.
certainly political science majors. So I was like, well, I'm gonna switch my major to economics. And I don't know if that was the best decision or not, because it was really hard,
I bet.
really and not, I didn't get straight A's.
No.
So definitely not the best for my GPA, but logical thinking, economics does have a lot of kind of thinking through logically problems. So it might have helped, but
That's
that was,
amazing that you really did it all for law school. Like, you did that research and you were like, I need to do economics because I found these facts and this is what I'm going to do. I mean, I didn't even want to take a statistics course, like a single statistics course when I went to UMass. I tried to find the course. It was a big enough place where you could find a course that would just sort of be the substitute for that. And so I found that course. But you to just dive into economics, like knowing that that's going to help you with law school, that is very impressive, Don.
I was, I was backpedaling, right? I was like, how am I going to get there? I've got to figure out how to do well on that LSAT because I had to have a good grade to get, get a good score on my LSAT to get into law school. So,
Yeah.
well,
Wow.
it must have worked. Something worked out right.
It's amazing. So tell us about your first position. Well, first let me ask you, like, do you remember your law school experience? Like, what was that like for you?
Absolutely. I loved it. I
Okay.
loved every minute of it. It was, I've tried to talk my kids into maybe going to law school because I just think
Nice.
it teaches you to think different. It just opens up a whole new way to learn about things and be able to talk about things and present them. I just think that it's one of the best ways to learn how to learn, you
Mhm.
know? And
Yeah.
I've always liked school, and just kind of getting in there and having to it was hard. That first semester was so hard, but I had gotten behind, right? I told you I kind of wasted the first 4 years of my 20s.
Right.
So
Right.
when I went to Whittier, they had an accelerated program, so I could get in and out in 2.5 years. Started
Wow.
in the summer of actually January of 2000 and graduated in May of 2002.
Okay.
So, and I love to write, and I just thought, just the fact that the cases are basically all structured the same way, and there
Yeah.
was a system in place. I loved it.
Yeah. That's all. I mean, hey, that's awesome. It was what you were waiting for, sort of, and it actually kind of came true. Like something you were waiting to do, and it actually ended up really clicking. And here we
Oh,
are today on the Lawyer Stories podcast. So that's great, Don.
no, let me just tell you. So the hardest thing though, Benny, was really, so I'd always wanted to be a lawyer, and that's kind of a heavy thing to think about, right? And then maybe not accomplishing that goal. And when I signed up to take that LSAT prep class, you had to go in and you had to take an LSAT prep class to
Yep.
figure out where you were. And I remember that getting up that morning, like, it was the hardest thing in this whole journey, which seems so stupid. Like, I just remember laying in bed, it was raining outside, and I was like, okay, I've got to get up, I've got to go take this test. And I was so scared that my score would be so low that there's no possible way that I'd be able to get into law school, and then my dream would be crushed. And I forced myself to get up and go. And I promise you that was harder than applying to law school, taking the bar.
Wow. You mean
You're
the
out.
process of getting up to go, not the actual test itself?
Exactly. Just
Wow.
just saying, okay, I'm just gonna, maybe I'm not smart enough, maybe I'm not gonna score well enough, but you know what? I've said I'm gonna do this, I want to do it, I'm gonna get up and try. So that was really kind of life lessons.
Sort of like imposter syndrome, like they call that now, imposter syndrome, I think. Like, I don't know if they ever used to call it back then, for me
Yeah.
either, but okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's very strange, but seriously, I mean, that was really the most difficult step on the whole
Yeah.
journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
All these people are like, oh, I want to be a lawyer, or I thought about being a lawyer. I could have been a lawyer,
right, right. I can argue. Yeah.
Exactly.
Little tougher than that.
I was scared I was going to be one of those people. I wanted to be a lawyer.
Oh,
So,
that's right. Well, I think that's very interesting. Like, because I think for me, I took a year off between between undergrad and law school, and I felt like if I never went back, maybe I never would. You
yeah,
get caught up in some other corporate job or doing something else, and then you get into your lifestyle. And then you look back and you say, I wanted to do this. I should have done this. So you're saying, like, you did it, like you just went for it, like you didn't, and now you don't live with that. What would have been, sort of thing.
exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the biggest lessons, right? Just, if you want to do something, just start. That's the hardest thing. Just take
Start.
that
It
one
is, yeah.
step.
Just start. I love that. So tell us about your first position as an attorney. Where you immediately started trying cases. So tell us what kind of cases you were working on and how that kind of came to be where you were immediately trying them.
I got so lucky. I thought I was really unlucky, but I got so lucky. So when I came out in 2002, jobs were really hard to come by.
Okay.
And I put out like 100 resumes. I had a brand new son. My son was 6 months old when I took the bar. And, trying to kind of juggle all that and figure out how to do it. And the girl that I studied for the bar with, she was dating a guy that worked at a plaintiff's firm in Orange County. And they're like, I think, she said, I think they need a law clerk over there. I went, okay, well, I'm going to go apply. So I went, and it was a dad and two brothers that owned the firm. And I started working for the dad at first, and he did medical board defense. Brilliant guy, also a doctor,
Wow.
Vietnam veteran, great guy. The sons were so amazing, just so generous with their knowledge.
Nice.
And I worked my ass off, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was there early, I stayed late, I did, all kinds of extra things that just to learn. Because when you're a baby lawyer, you don't know anything.
Sure.
And I didn't know if I was going to pass the bar. So I just hustled my butt off, and they offered me a job when they found out that I'd passed.
It's amazing.
And I mean, a week after I found out that I'd passed, they sent me to New York to take the deposition of the editor-in-chief of Sports Illustrated on
Wow,
the sexual abuse case that they were handling at the time. And, I mean, it was kind of a layup. I was so nervous. It was crazy. They just called me in their office like, hey, you want to take this depo? And I'm like, okay, yes, just say yes. I'm terrified, but yes. And they had a mediation or something like that on the case the same day. And there was another lawyer that had aligned interests. So it wasn't as big of a risk as I felt like it was. But so, and then, there were 3 cases. I tried three civil cases that year that they let me try. And they were so generous with their knowledge, and they just let me run. Me run all the cases they had. They had medical malpractice cases, child sexual abuse cases. I took Cardinal Mahoney's deposition in a sexual abuse case against, the church, the Catholic Church. So I got a lot of really great experience just because I was hungry. I was willing to do anything. So
that's amazing. Sometimes you hit it right like that, and sometimes it just doesn't work out. But that sounds like a great situation. What do you remember, like what kind of work they had you doing when you first get in, and like how long you were there before you passed the bar?
Yeah, so I started in August. So graduated in June, started in August, found out my bar results on like the end of November, beginning of December.
Right.
So when I first started, I was working for the dad, Philip Cifarelli. They called him PSC because there was a junior and a senior. And initially I was just kind of getting cases ready for him. Like I was just doing everything they told me to. I got to write an appeal when I was waiting for my bar results. Wow. And got an amicus curiae brief called, just looking back on it, I was thinking, my boss said, why did you think to go get an amicus brief? And I was sweaty. I saw one in another case that I read and it seemed like a unique issue. So I called and they agreed. And he's like, he just kind of looked at me like, okay. Now thinking back on that, I was like, oh, it's probably a pretty good thing to do right there. So
yeah,
I got to do stuff. Yeah.
So sort of skipping ahead, but this is more of like a question for advice. Like what advice would you provide to someone trying to polish their skills being a trial attorney?
You got to get out there and try cases. I think that so many cases settle. There is a huge risk of going forward. If you own a law firm or a partner in a law firm, I would just encourage you to allow your younger associates to go and try cases with you. You have to have that experience. Like the way we are organized now is the associates working up the case. If it goes to trial, then they go to trial with me. Mm-hmm. And once you see kind of the beginning and the end of a case, then you really know how to work it up, right? All of the puzzle pieces don't come together until you work it up. Don't settle your cases, try them. You've got to try cases, and you're going to lose some. I certainly haven't won all of them. You're going to lose some, but you have to try them. And that's going to increase the overall value to your clients as well, based on your experience and your knowledge and just your confidence in handling the cases.
Yeah, no, I could definitely see that. So in 2011, you moved back to Texas with your family. You achieved a $322 million verdict for a single plaintiff asbestos case. So tell us about that a little bit.
It was crazy. It was like a John Grisham novel, really. I mean, it's in this little itty bitty town called
Really?
Raleigh, Mississippi. There were maybe like 6 buildings, one street, one main street. That we went to lunch at the gas station because they had the most amazing fried chicken. um,
Awesome.
I moved to jurors. I had just taken this job handling these cases with a new firm. And this was the first case that we all tried together. And I moved a chair for a jury. And in Mississippi, like they had like 300 jurors come in because everybody knows, but everybody has asbestos, right? Everybody has a family
Yeah.
member that's had asbestosis or something like that. So anyway, the whole courtroom is full. It's this old courtroom. The jurors are all in there, and I moved a chair out of the way for one of the jurors, and one of the defense lawyers saw me and and moved for a mistrial, and the mistrial was granted.
Wait, you moved a chair?
Moved a chair.
Why? Like why? You were just trying to like.
So I was.
No, I mean like not like it's your fault, but I don't. That just sounds so odd.
So the courtroom was just so packed, right? And this guy, one of the potential, jurors, was trying to get through, and I was by a chair. It's just, I'm a helper. That's just normal part of me.
Well,
right?
yeah, it's like etiquette, right?
Exactly. So I just moved the chair, but it was against Union Carbide and Chevron Chemical Company. It was a drilling mud case, an asbestos drilling mud case. So it was pretty, I mean, those defense lawyers were, high notch, willing to do anything and
What did
everything.
they think like the violation was, or like the
Some sort of, I don't know, being too friendly or something. I mean, I don't know.
oh,
I
okay.
mean,
Or like contact with the jury sort of thing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
I didn't even talk to him. I just moved the chair. That's all I did. But my boss was super cool at the time. We were sitting in the chambers, and she moved for a mistrial, the defense lawyer that represented Union Carbide, and the judge sat there and he granted it. And my boss just kind of leaned over to me. So cool. He goes, "Don't worry about it. It'll be okay." I'm like, okay. So then, we had to come back, new panel. We got a $22 million verdict for the compensatory damages. And then I got to argue the punitive damages phase, and they awarded $150 million against each defendant. So it was $300 million in punitive damages and $22 million in compensatory.
I mean that's so much money. Like was this like the worst asbestos situation you've ever seen?
So drilling mud, they used asbestos as like a thickener in drilling mud. So the guys that were working out on the rigs would shake these bags of basically asbestos dust to thicken the mud to pull the oil out. So it was very dusty. I mean, and this was way after these people knew that asbestos was bad, right? And they were using it in a powdered form. Actually made it into a powder, which that's how you get sick from asbestos if it's airborne. So it was pretty compelling, the facts associated with the drilling mud and the prior knowledge that they had. There was a great document that we had where they were actually calculating how much it would cost to change it as opposed to settle lawsuits. So that was the document that we got into evidence for the punitive damages phase. It was less expensive to settle lawsuits than it was to change the product. So that's why they kept on making the product that same way. Sad thing
that's unbelievable. How long was the jury out for?
That's a good question. Not very long. I honestly don't remember now.
So was there an appeal or anything? Or no?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, that's the sad story. So yeah, they appealed it. They sent it back. We retried it, and the second time they moved the venue, right? So we didn't do it.
Oh wait, after you retried it after the chair, or
oh no. So no, this is a whole new trial. So I moved the chair. We get a new panel. We try it. We get $320 million verdict. They appeal it. And then the appellate court sends it back for a trial on issues. There were some issues that they reversed and remanded on. So we tried it again, and we in a different venue because they argued basically that the venue wasn't fair, that the judge wasn't fair. They were all prejudiced towards plaintiff. Basically, went to a different venue, and we lost the second time we tried it.
So that's just so like, I don't even know what to say.
It's okay. It's been a long time, but
I don't even know what to say to that.
I've healed.
I'm sorry. I should have just left it at my initial question. I didn't mean to ask these, but it's just, I'm just curious how that whole thing works. I mean, that's
Full disclosure, right?
I mean, how do you? I don't understand how you go from that to nothing. That just makes no sense. That seems like something's wrong with the system.
That's the whole point about being a trial lawyer, though, right?
Yeah.
You go in there, you get one jury, it's just, that's what I love about it, honestly, is that every court, because I try cases all over the country,
Right.
just going in and having to adapt and learn where you're at, and be able to play in that playing field,
Right.
because they're all different. It's super challenging and really fun.
So was that like how many years? Was that like a 2-year thing, like a 3-year thing, like a?
I want to say maybe like a year and a half, maybe.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I got to go back and double check all this. It's been a while. That was 2011. That was
Been a while.
that was a while ago. Yeah.
All right. So let's ask you something that goes back to something we already asked, and then I'm going to move on to about your current practice. So you got to swear in. We were talking about the Supreme Court and your love for it or admiration. I don't know what word you want to use, but like, so what was it like to take two of your associates, and make the motion to have them admitted?
So that was cool. So I got to go back twice, right? So after I'd been practicing for 5 years, my law school took a class. And if you could get 2 sponsors that were already members of the US Supreme Court bar, then you could get admitted to the Supreme Court bar. So luckily my 2 bosses were members of the United States Supreme Court bar, and they sponsored me.
Yeah,
so
nice.
I got sworn in. I was like the first thing that John Roberts did in his new, when he became Chief Justice.
Oh, nice.
So we're in a class of candidates, and I was part of that class. So that was the first, matter of business that they did for that time period, for that session.
Yeah, I get it. Yep. That's
so
really cool.
Yeah. So then we had 2 associates. They both were candidates. I sponsored one. They both knew somebody else that was a member. So we made a trip of it, like a firm trip of it.
Nice.
They brought their wives, girlfriends. My husband went. And being there and making that motion, I'll just tell you, I messed up that motion like crazy. Like I didn't even know what words were coming out of my mouth.
Really?
It was
It's like me in law school getting called on. So you went up there, you make the motion.
Yep.
And do you have to say something about the applicants?
Yeah. Basically, I mean, you don't have to do some of the appellate courts, some of the federal courts require that, like the North Circuit here in Texas, the person sponsoring you has to say something about your character. It wasn't really like that. You had to kind of just say one phrase about them being, competent and being good candidates or something like that. But I fumbled my words like crazy.
I'm sure you're not the only one. You're up there with like these 9.
I was the only one that day. I'll tell you that. I was the only one that day. So.
That happens. I'm sure it was much more amazing than you thought. So all right. So nursing home abuse, right? This is really so important that you are taking these cases. I personally work in an industry, my full-time job, where I take care of, not take care of, but I oversee a place, a housing authority. So we have a lot of elderly, and I sort of, I don't see this, but I take care of these people. You know what I mean? Like you want to make sure nothing bad happens when the home aides come in, or, that sort of thing. So at Smith and Clinesmith, tell us about some of the nursing home abuse and like the neglect cases that you see? And like, what's the most common type of abuse and neglect?
Well, I mean, it's really prevalent, and it's sad because the nursing homes are getting a lot of money from government entities, right?
Sure.
Medicare,
Yep.
Medicaid. They're getting a lot of money to take care of these people, and the corporate entities are basically understaffing, not giving enough supplies, not giving enough training,
That's right.
and siphoning that money off, sometimes even diverting it into other entities, right? Like paying a management company an exorbitant amount of money when they testify that they didn't really do anything, putting money into the real estate arm of the company, siphoning that money off. So, the way it manifests is if people aren't being changed and repositioned because they can't move themselves, they get horrific pressure wounds, right? We've
Yeah.
seen some just
Right.
awful pressure wounds, dehydration,
You need
malnutrition.
pressure removed if they're not getting changed. Is that what you said? Is that?
Yeah. So if they are incontinent, right, they can't get up
Oh,
and go to
okay.
the
Okay.
bathroom,
Yep.
right? So they have diapers or
Yep.
bedding, and a lot of times they'll just let them lay there.
Okay.
And if they can't move themselves either, if you're just laying in one place and you can't move yourself, the first thing that happens is a pressure wound. That's why they're called those, bed sores. That's why they're called
Yeah.
pressure wounds.
Okay.
Yeah. So lots of falls and
Yep.
fractures, head injuries, sometimes sexual abuse, which is awful. Sometimes, yeah, I mean, restraints, over medication, because so they don't have to go in there and attend to them like they should. They over medicate them. So they're basically in just kind of a coma.
Wow.
So we've seen just a lot. And what I'm really proud of is that we're taking cases across the country,
Yep.
and in the way we're trying to do things allows us to represent more people, because the cases are difficult cases, right? Take a lot of time, a lot of effort. They're expensive to work up. And a lot of nursing home lawyers really just do a small practice, like 20
Right.
cases, something like that.
Right.
And when they do that, they take really the worst injuries, the best families. And our practice is more devoted to being able to help that next level too. The folks that have been injured, but maybe there's, the case isn't perfect for one or more reasons.
Okay.
That person still deserves the utmost respect. We just, our phrase is protecting dignity, right? Demanding justice. So for everybody, not just some people. So that's what I'm really proud about with the
Yeah.
national practice.
I have to wonder, like, it's got to be hard to prove those. I mean, has social media or like video, like people just sort of, because I see this from time to time, it's like it's appalling. On social media, like people will capture like somebody being pushed or harassed. I mean, that's not physical, but how do you work up a case? Like, what do you need? What does Clinesmith need to really be able to go forward with the case?
So we really focus kind of in two different areas, right? There's the medical component, and then
Yep.
there's the corporate neglect component.
Okay.
So if somebody is developing pressure wounds, the defense almost always argues that they're unavoidable. And I'll just tell you that pressure wounds are absolutely avoidable, right? If they're doing the things that they need to do on a daily basis by changing and repositioning them every 2 hours,
Mhm.
9 times out of 10, they're not going to get a pressure wound. So the medical records really are helpful in that if they say they're doing certain things that are not aligned with what the person's condition is, like if they end up becoming septic or they go to the hospital and they're incredibly malnourished and dehydrated to where they have a kidney injury because they're so dehydrated, they're not getting the care they need, because they're supposed to be providing these daily care in all aspects. So that's the first way that we prove it. The next way that we prove it is we look at the corporate structure. Do they have adequate training? We look at their cost reports. A lot One thing that's great about this industry is, and it's getting even better, is these companies have to make a lot of information public because they're taking Medicare and Medicaid funds.
Interesting.
So
Okay.
yeah, so they have to report, they have to report these things to the government, and the government goes in and inspects them and fields complaints and does surveys. There was a law that was put in place in 1987 called the Nursing Home Reform Act, passed by Ronald Reagan. And that really kind of created a structure that puts all kinds of guidelines in place, or expanded the guidelines to where the states have to make sure that they're providing oversight, going in, inspecting the facilities, and making sure that they're doing what they're supposed to. And we can get access to all of those inspections. So when we take a case, we look to see whether or not there are any deficiencies, any complaints, whether or not they've been cited by either the federal government or the state government.
Oh,
So
okay. That's interesting.
there's all kinds of aspects that we look at to be able to prove the case.
So who is your client? Like, who has standing? Like, who is the person that comes to you? Is it the family member who says, okay, like, sign off on this and we're going to go forward? Like, how does that work?
That's a great question. Most of the time, yes. Most of the time it's a family member.
Okay.
But we've got to make sure it's the right family member, that they actually have authority to pursue the lawsuit. So we
Right.
actually have a probate department in our firm.
Okay.
We have a senior associate that specializes in probate, works with probate lawyers all over the country, because the laws are different depending on which state that you're working in. Do you have to file probate before you file a lawsuit, or does it relate back? But most of the time it's either a surviving spouse or a surviving child that comes to us and reports the abuse. Sometimes we have the actual victim that's still living.
Are they usually not living, the victims?
Most of the time they are not living.
Wow.
Yeah. Or most of the time they pass away very soon after we sign the case. It's
Okay.
really sad. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. And then, so is the causation, I know I kind of just asked a question about this, but is that must be difficult. Getting like the direct causation, like the argument on the other side must be like, well, this person's like 95 or whatever, like they were going to die anyway. I mean, I don't know, like, is that something that's being argued? Like, how does that work?
Absolutely. That's exactly what they argue every single time. And the way we handle that is, even though they, the life was short, right? Even though they might not have had that much time at that point in your life is so much more valuable, right? Because you just don't have that much of it. And just because somebody is old doesn't mean that they don't deserve respect and dignity. That doesn't mean that they don't need to be changed, that they can be laying in their own feces and urine for hours, call lights being unanswered. So we really kind of hone in on the pain and suffering that the victim is going through while they're still alive, the survival claim.
Okay. And so how did you really get involved? Like, how did you make the pivot from doing these asbestos cases to getting into nursing home neglect and abuse?
So my partner started practicing, had solo practitioner when it was 1998. And I met him when I was in undergrad going to North Texas.
Shout out to Curtis. Clinesmith. All right, go ahead.
That's right.
You were in undergrad. Go ahead.
That's right, Curtis Clinesmith. So we were at some judge's function, and I met him, and he was actually working at another firm and offered me a job at this event. And I took him up on it, and he laughs. He's like, I didn't have any authority whatsoever to offer you a job. He had to go to his bosses and say, hey, I met this girl. She seems smart. She wants a law clerk position. Can we give her a job? And they did. So awesome. From that point forward, he was just kind of my mentor. I kept in contact with him. He wrote me a letter of recommendation to get into law school. We just kind of kept in contact. So he was doing his own thing with his practice. And then I was in California learning and growing. And then I got this offer back in Dallas because Curtis called me. He said, hey, there's this law firm that's looking for somebody that like you. They want somebody a trial lawyer to run this docket. So at that point in time, we realized that we could start an asbestos practice together after I'd worked for this asbestos firm.
Okay.
So that's what we did. We started an asbestos practice together. And then he kept his own firm. So we had a firm together, and then he had a firm.
Okay.
And so I worked on asbestos cases across the country, not all across the country, but in different states around the country. And we were just having a conversation one day, and I said, why don't we do nursing home cases nationwide? We've got local counsel, we've got lawyers that are licensed in multiple states. I'm like, why don't we do that? And we just both kind of a light bulb went off in our heads. It just seemed right. And it's just such a compelling area of law too. So
yeah, it's so important too. I mean, it really is. It's such important work, as our people, our citizens, our people in society get older, and they're in these nursing homes, and they've lived a life too of passion. And I was talking to my staff today about this, about how people, they go through their life, they had a job like we did, and now they're older, and they're slowed down, and they deserve the respect and to be treated like everybody, like everybody else. And so it's such an important advocacy and work that you're doing. So tell us what it's like to build a national elder law practice.
Challenging, very challenging, right? I would say that COVID was really our jumping off point, because if you would have asked me before COVID if I would have taken a really important deposition by phone or by video, I would have said, "You're crazy. I'll never do that." Right. And when I was practicing doing our mass tort stuff, I was traveling constantly, right? I'd have to be at a hearing. And if I had to be at a hearing in California, then I'd have to leave the night before, go, it would eat up a whole day and a half, sometimes 2 days, just to go to one hearing.
Yeah.
So with COVID, the court started having all the hearings online. We started being able to do depositions online because that's all we could do. And that was just really a mind shift, I think, for our profession. Like, we don't necessarily have to be there in that same room to have a connection with the person across the camera. You can still be persuasive. You can still be compassionate. You can still get good answers to your questions through video. So we just really realized that we could have kind of a broader reach with that technology. So we really dug in. We hired Litify as our company. They do our CRM, and we're really trying to use technology to build out our practice, because to be able to handle a large volume in this kind of case, we have to be really efficient. Efficient.
Yep.
So that's, and we've grown. We're twice the size today as we were this time last year. So we have 15 lawyers now.
Yeah. Wow.
And 30 staff. So we're growing, and it's all kind of fitting together, trying to figure out how everybody should.
Hello? So Don, where are what are your jurisdictions now that you're taking cases?
So we're working cases in 18 states now. And we have lawyers. The UBE has also really kind of changed the way we can practice in multiple jurisdictions, right? Because somebody taking the UBE can get licensed in so many states.
Okay.
They don't have, I think 2 years, you have 2 years to apply to, I think maybe 40 states except the UBE now. So most of our associates are licensed in at least 2 states, sometimes 3. And one of our associates is licensed in 8 states.
Wow.
So we use that structure to help quite a bit. And then we have local counsel that I've worked with over the years that also work with us in this area. So, we're in California, Alabama, Texas, Florida, Georgia, Pennsylvania, New York,
That's great. I mean, Florida, you've got to have a ton of that down there, right? Like that's got to be pretty a good place to be.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's kind of interesting. Florida's kind of an interesting bird, but lots of cases down there. Lots of people that have been victims of elder abuse for sure. Lots of retired folks that are living in assisted living facilities and nursing homes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So excuse me. So how important is it to have processes and systems in place when you're growing a firm?
So important. So we've learned that over the last 3 years as well. So we actually kind of learned the hard way about that, because Curtis and I are both visionaries. Neither one of us is the operations component to that. So
Okay.
we read traction, and we're trying to figure out how that's going to work, right, with us, because we're both visionaries. We're lucky we have a COO that is much better than either one of us when it comes to operations. But Curtis and I started really digging into business. He's more of the business guy. I'm more of the trial guy.
Okay.
But structurally, he was like, we have got to get some processes in place. And I was thinking, we have processes, we have a checklist. When I bring somebody in, I tell them, okay, we go this is when we serve discovery, this is when we do that, the system. But nothing was in writing as to how to do that. So really kind of really dug in, and it took us a while to get our leadership team to buy into that, right? They kind of wanted to hold on to all of that knowledge themselves and not necessarily share it. And it takes a lot of time to write processes as
Yeah,
well.
totally.
So, I mean, it took us a good solid year to get a full buy-in from our leadership team,
Okay.
to where they were writing them, but they were hating it, right? They
Yeah.
didn't
Oh, yeah.
understand where we were trying to go, that we were going to bring in more people. And if you don't have those written processes, how do we write a motion the Smith Clinesmith way? How do we
Hmm.
conduct discovery? How, all of the little steps. When do we get cost reports? When do we take depositions? What type of discovery do we ask for? If you don't have that written down, you can't scale at all. So it was we definitely experienced some growing pains when it
Yeah.
came to that, but we're getting there. We've got a website, that's kind of where we keep all of our training materials,
Oh, cool.
and we call it Smithology, which is kind of cool.
I like
So
that.
it kind of works. It works like Google, to where you just go on and type in hearing prep or deposition, and everything in our system that has that will populate, so that whoever's searching it can look for what hopefully that's going to be helpful for them to complete their task. So it's a work in progress. We're still building it out, but you can't scale if you don't have processes.
Wow. Yeah, processes are definitely really important to help the whole thing work smoothly. So, like, what advice would you give someone who wants to launch their own firm?
Uh, make sure you are resilient. Know that it's not going to be perfect. Know that you're going to have to be a really good problem solver. You're going to have two hats at all times. You got to have your lawyer hat on and your business hat on.
Right. Right.
It's not for the faint of heart, right? You have got to be willing to just put yourself out there and take some risks, and make sure that you're really building relationships with other people that have been through that
Yeah.
process, right? Because I feel like everybody at our level is pretty giving, right? We're all trying to help each other, because the more people that we can help, the more people they can help. I mean,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
the more we can share information to make sure that we're representing our clients to the best of our abilities, the more justice can be done. So I think make good relationships, be resilient, and just keep learning and growing, and you can
Yeah.
do it. Believe in
Yeah.
yourself.
I like it. So, both yourself and Curtis Clinesmith have been consistently recognized, and congratulations on the National Trial Lawyers Association's top 100 in the field of nurse home litigation. You've been recognized as national top and the National Women Trial Lawyers Association. So I got a little caught up in an acronym here. So like, what do those things mean to you?
I just, it means something to be recognized for sure, right?
Yeah.
I think the most important thing to me though is being able to just kind of pass it on, right? To make a difference. Like you can't have a platform to make a difference if you're not recognized, right? So somehow you've got to build that relationship with folks that are aligned with your goals and your values so that you can share information with the younger lawyers. I think that's the most important thing is you got to be able to pass it on. And if you're not speaking and talking to people about how you do it, then you're failing, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You got to share. You've got to share what you learn.
Love it. That's great. So, Dawn, have we left anything out today? Anything else you want to add about the firm? Or I wanted to make sure that we got every point across that you would like to share.
I just appreciate being on with you. I love your approach. I love, just getting kind of the personal story behind who we are and what we do. I think that's lawyers sometimes get a bad rap, right? Not everybody knows that we really care deeply about what we do. So I just appreciate what you're doing.
I'm sorry.
I appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you very much. And I think, you're doing like really important work. Keep up the great work, keep growing. I'm looking forward to seeing more growth with the firm. I mean, you guys are, getting huge, I would say, pretty big. And, the work is tremendous. Fighting elder abuse, with Clinesmith. It's such important stuff. So thanks for doing what you do. And I appreciate you coming on today.
Thank you.
Thanks. And please stay right there. Everybody else, thanks for tuning in wherever you are in the world today. Enjoy yourselves. Cheers.